Well, if you've made it this far, you've either enjoyed the series or have subjected yourself to nearly 2 hours of hate watching. Hopefully the former. This is going to be a more casual video since for once in this process I don't have to source anything and can simply give my opinion. Given the conversations happening in the comments, I thought this type of format might be appreciated, and it's also trying something new. Unfortunately, the channel doesn't meet the criteria to unlock community posts yet. I'd hoped the Venat video would have been ready at least a month sooner than it was, and when 6.4 released, I was desperately hoping that nothing would happen in the Pandemonium conclusion to cause me to have to make massive edits. I made the decision it didn't, even though I probably should have and would have liked to have included more, but the desire to simply be done after the length of time spent on it already was overwhelming. However, I said I would address the parallels between Athena and Venat. Honestly, I thought it was so blatantly obvious I struggle with what else to say about it. Is there any meaningful difference between the ideals and goals of Athena and Venat beyond the latter having been successful? Is there any difference between them in terms of the proposed and actualized impact on the ancients? Eric's response to Athena is also the stance the game has always taken. The ends don't justify the means. This is applied universally save for one exception. It ultimately comes down to the unacceptable cost to those currently living on the star. All forms of life were an acceptable sacrifice towards the future both envisioned. Athena is condemned by every ancient character present, 2 of whom are members of the governing body of the world who reflect the values of their society. Had Athena's plan to ascend to godhood, remake the ancients into something greater, and the result created a species of being capable of defeating Endsinger, would her actions then be justified? Would she no longer be considered a villain? Worth noting, the French translation uses the word genocide in regards to the proposed actions of a character clearly meant to draw comparisons to Venat. I can't tell you how much I fought not to mention other translations in the video. English is probably the worst language to play in when it comes to accuracy to the source material. It's particularly egregious when it comes to leaving out important context. There have been a lot of complaints about it over the past year or so. Opinions on the Pandemonium finale have been mixed, but since it's my series, this is my opinion. I thought it was realistically the best we were going to get. I had held out hope the writers would return to nuance after the Omega Beyond the Rift quests, only for the 6.2 MSQ to double down on lavishing Hydaelyn with undue praise. Myths of the Realm also seems to exist solely for the purpose of once again glossing over the severity of the Sundering and softening Venat. I also had to laugh at the fact that some of the 12 are not subtly based on the ancients from Elpis we've often cited as examples of them being open-minded and capable of change. I don't want to dwell too much on myths other than to say I will be surprised if 6.5 doesn't further retcon the story, because the writers have consistently been making Venat look worse, not better, with everything they've released since 6.0. Most of the group's money is on retconning that her followers didn't know or that their souls weren't consumed by Hydaelyn's summoning. Whatever happens, I have no intention of modifying anything I've done or issuing any retractions. The series is accurate up to 6.4. These are the thoughts and feelings we've been mulling over for almost 2 years, and a curveball at the end to further justify the unjustifiable isn't going to change anything. I'm the outlier in being content with Pandemonium's conclusion. Given the game's commitment to Venat being all things right and good, I had no expectations of criticism towards her or the Sundering. I found it painfully transparent that Heroi avoided both subjects, and honestly that's probably the most he could do. Despite my dislike of the Endwalker narrative and the way Venat's character was handled, a lot of people did love it and her. Were I trying not to step on anyone's toes, I probably would have done something similar, although I know that's wholly unsatisfying for anyone who hoped for some form of catharsis, especially in the face of Athena being such an overt mirror to Venat. Most of us do like Athena because she's an honest version of Venat. It's frequently been said that Venat would have been an amazing anti-villain, probably one of the best in the franchise if they hadn't decided to whitewash her. Pandemonium did its best to return to the nuance of Shadowbringers, including a callback to the Victor Writes the Tale, which I appreciated because I have to say I was absolutely dreading 6.4. I had the worst predictions of how it was going to play out, and aside from the Warrior of Light remaining silent, thankfully none of them came true. However, it compounded the issues with the Warrior of Light. You could handwave it before by saying the Warrior of Light trusted Venat to do the right thing and she didn't, but as of the conclusion, they're now actively complicit in allowing both the final days and the sundering to play out unabated for people they supposedly care about and who have gone out of their way to assist them, even to their own detriment. It's screw you, I got mine in a nutshell, which, as I've said before, is not my idea of a good person, much less a hero. The player character is unfortunately a selfish, self-serving hypocrite now. I've seen comments that disagree with this mindset, which is fine. Morality is subjective, but it's like I said in the video, if you have a set of values where you consider the Warrior of Light's actions immoral, it causes an uncomfortable dissonance. Going back to the nuance, one of the things I loved was Elidibus saying that, paraphrase, he dared not delve too deeply into the memories of his soul, or he's sure he'd feel differently. The implication being that deep down he is not happy with the situation, but he's finally returning to the star, and he doesn't want to go out with the bitterness and resentment he did in the Crystal Tower. So he instead chooses to focus on the positive memories he recalls. I can respect that. However, I also can't blame anyone for feeling angry, if not disgusted, at the fact we've now purposely left these people to die horribly, and one of the most tragic victims of it all is forced into a position of smiling about it at the end. Well, at least he's no longer soul dead, and that's worth celebrating. I have to wonder if that wasn't a bit of an FU to the MSQ as well. I did say some of the writers seemed to be dying on hills for their take on the story, and having him restored given that shouldn't have been possible would appear to be just that. The one thing I wished we'd gotten to see, though, was the Unsundered and the Ethereal Sea together with Hythlodaeus, especially since as far as we know, this was it for the Ancients. I asked some of the others if they had anything they wanted to add about Pandemonium. I'll just quote what one of them said that received popular agreement. Well, beside the obvious parallels of Venat and Athena's plans regarding ancient mankind, it should be pointed out how abhorrent it is to everyone on the ancient cast. Yet it dodges the Venat question almost entirely. It had the chance to offer an alternate timeline resolution when we went to speak to the real La Habrea, Elidibus, and Eric, but it didn't. It still treats the final days as something inevitable that is entirely on the Ancients to not solve because that's just the way it is. And that the Warrior of Light just lowers their eyes in response to Memory Eric's inquiry, rather than question anything about Venat's role in that narrative, reinforces the story's position that it couldn't be helped, and you're just sparing Eric's feelings. Yet had you told the truth of what Venat did, that was exactly what Athena was about to do, Eric may well have reacted strongly. The whole thing just persists in its forced, it couldn't be helped, sigh, so tragic narrative, and is just plain wrong and hypocritical to begin with. From one corner of its mouth, Pandemonium shows you how human the Ancients were and the values they held, even handing us on a platter a very practical way for Venat to show Ctesias events. Yet from the other, it completely refuses to backpedal on the MSQ's dumb effery. And you could also say something about Elidibus himself refusing to dwell too long on how his future/present self actually felt about everything. Feels like a handy metaphor for not looking at the ancient point of view too closely. This entire thing is awful and unfair. Put the protagonist cast in the place of the ancients as a whole, and later on of the Unsundered, and it becomes absurdly wrong. Themis's farewell really feels to me like sparing feelings and better to end this on a smile than on a spite-fueled rant. Which ultimately is in line with his character because, yeah, the planet is still there, isn't it? Pandemonium played it excessively safe. Panda just keeps up the pretense that Venat is right about everything and it's a done deal anyway. I found it extremely effing ridiculous and forced Eric would end his memory crystal waxing poetic about the weird familiar thing he interacted with for a couple of days. They really just cannot resist having people worship the ground we walk upon, and I feel that's liable to persist forever. I wanted to comment on Zero saying, but a true hero would not damn another world to save his own, which rules out both the Warrior of Light and Ardbert from hero status. I'm curious if Golbez is going to end up being another Azim shard, because honestly, it's on brand. This is also why I adamantly refute that Azim would have ever joined Venat. They are far too selfish when it comes to their world and loved ones to ever agree to a plan that forsakes them. As for the current MSQ, I wish I could be remotely interested in Yustola saying that the reflections are predisposed to rejoin the source, and that the source has an innate pull over them. She believes Hydaelyn sought to suppress that pull, which is why she was created with the power of light, of stasis. Unfortunately, I sincerely doubt anything will come of this. First, they've had ample opportunity to address her and the Sundering with nuance, and outside of Omega Beyond the Rift, have chosen not to, instead doubling down on precisely the opposite. Second, according to Yoshida in the Q&A, the Warrior of Light retains the Blessing of Light, so it would not surprise me if once again the rules don't apply to Hydaelyn, and unlike literally everyone else, somehow her magic persists in perpetuity when other entities, like Zodiark, which greatly surpassed her in power, have their influence immediately disperse upon demise. Same with Emmett's recreation of Amarot, we're told it'll eventually dissipate with time. Probably the only story hook that would make me interested in 7.0 is Hydaelyn's residual magic failing and the shards begin being pulled to the source, along with acknowledgement that the Sundering effed everyone over, past and present. It's also perfectly within the character of Venat for the Sundering to have been a temporary measure, just long enough to teach people suffering and defeat Medion, the only Dynamis-related threat Atheris has ever known. As for 7.0, my first reaction to the trailer was, it's not releasing for a year. The theme is Warrior of Light Summer Vacation, and all of the Scions are there. Teaser trailer or no, it seemed aimed at people who still play and love the game. I didn't see anything that would be allure for anyone who is unhappy with or quit during Endwalker. I haven't found much on the source to be interesting. The only place I've loved so far was Ishgard, so I also wasn't impressed by the New World locale. I would have been more intrigued by going to another shard with no holds barred creatively, as opposed to the Americas but fantasy. It makes it look like the current Void Arc isn't going to amount to much of anything either, and that they may have changed their mind about a world-altering event coming in 6.5. Also, flashbacks to ARR Beast Tribes is not something I'd want to have to deal with for even part of an expansion. One person said if they wanted to do a political intrigue-focused adventure, we already had Garlemald. Others have said it looks like filler with no stakes again. Many unhappy about not being free of the Scions, saying it wouldn't appeal to anyone who isn't endeared to their characters, and still manage to come across as exhausting to those who are, but who were hoping for fresh faces. What a bait and switch that was. Anyone remember how Yoshida had to assure people before Endwalker released that the new adventure wasn't going to be the Warrior of Light left alone in a foreign land, only for the end result to be nothing changed at all? No compelling villain to be seen, and apparently the same tired regime change plot. Also, we didn't need to be forced into even more lightheartedness when Endwalker's patches had been more than enough. Thematically, it fell flat and felt so far removed from Final Fantasy. A few other notes: if anyone missed it, Banri Oda did a lore Q&A in Korea where he confirmed that the Sundered are a different species to the Ancients, something I would have put in the video if I'd known about it soon enough. Question: why is there so little difference in size, intellect, and power between the people of the rejoined source and the first? With the difference between the ancients and modern humans, I would have thought people in the source should be stronger, but they don't seem that different. Do all 14 worlds have to be rejoined for them to become like the ancients? Answer: I think that even if all 14 worlds were rejoined, the density of the souls would return to normal, but their bodies would not. After all, their species itself has diverged. That's why the Ascians' plan was to sacrifice all life on the rejoined world to Zodiark, so everything could be regenerated. I also wanted to comment on the channel. We still have upcoming videos, but my role here is finished. You can still catch me in the comments section, but I won't be producing any more content. I've quit the game and I have no intention of returning to it anytime soon. The Venat video that turned into a docu-series was a one and done for me. This project was ongoing for several months, writing, researching, and editing. It's a collection of every critical discussion I've seen over the past year and a half. My favorite section is the Sundering cutscene, because it all came together so beautifully. Plus, I hate what that cutscene has done to lore discussion, and that thorough debunking was long overdue. It's a shame I took on this project so late. I suppose part of it was a vain hope that eventually, surely one content creator or another would have some criticism, and it just never happened. I came to the realization that if I didn't do it, no one ever would, and I think that a lot of people dissatisfied with Endwalker needed to feel seen, and that just wasn't being provided by any major player in the community. There's definitely a vacuum in the 14 fandom for critique. Anyway, that's all I can think of to say. Thanks to everyone who's watched and commented on the videos. I often struggled with thoughts of wondering if it was worth it, but felt it was something I needed to complete for myself. Seeing it resonate with so many people made the journey worthwhile, haha. The videos that we'll be releasing after this one, I have no part in at all, so I'm excited to see what the next person's project will be, and I hope you will be too.